Alright boys, so this is some little information on exact values. So these are the triangles that went into your theory notes today. The first one, well, this was actually the second one on the board, but it's one of the ones. Again, a triangle with a base and a height of 1. So using Pythagoras' theorem, we find that that is root 2. So we use that to set up the fact that, well, sine of 45 is the opposite over the hypotenuse, which is 1 on root 2, which is the same as cos of 45, 1 on root 2. And the tan of 45 is the opposite 1 over the adjacent 1, so it's just 1. The second thing, now you don't need to copy that down because that's already, it should already be in your notes. The second one is if we take a triangle that has a right angle and a base of 1 and a height of 2, we end up finding, again using Pythagoras' theorem, that that is root 3. And that's a 60 degree angle and that's a 30 degree angle. Alright, so the sine of 30, well, that's opposite over hypotenuse, that's a half. The cosine of 30 is what? Root 3 over 2. And the tan of 30 is 1 over root 3. So those are some very exact values. Now this time the sine of 60 is root 3 on 2. The cosine of 60, well, if you look at it, it's the adjacent is 1 and the hypotenuse is 2, so that's a half. And the tan of 60 is root 3 on 1, which is just root 3. So he says a bit of a crossover effect here between these two. And again, that's because of those complement rules that we looked at yesterday. And it's in the same way, that's one of our complement rules as well, so that the tan of one angle is the ratio of one angle there is the reciprocal of the complement. So the complement is 60 and the reciprocal of 1 on root 3 is just root 3. Now boys, if we extend this idea, we know those exact values there. And we've also looked at yesterday what our angles of any magnitude are. We need to extend that idea, exact values of any magnitude. So what if I ask you to find something like the exact value of sine of 150 degrees? We know that's in quadrant 2, so we do 180 minus that angle. So that means my acute angle would be 30 degrees. So that means we know the sine of 150 is equal to the sine of 30. And because that's in quadrant 2, we know that they're both positive. Well, we know that sine 30 is a half, so therefore the sine of 150 is a half. You can check that on your calculator if you like, but it is true. Let's do another little example. What if I ask you for the cosine of 210 degrees? Well, again, that's in what quadrant? Well, that's in quadrant 3. So again, I take 180 off, or a straight line off my angle. So that means my acute angle will be 210 minus 180 is 30 degrees. So that means the cosine of 210 is equal to the cosine of 30. But now, because we're in quadrant 3 here, and cosine is negative, well, that means we have to put a negative sign there. Well, again, if we look back and you look at your notes, the cos of 30 degrees, was root 3 on 2. So that means the cos of 210 is the negative of root 3 on 2. Some boundary angles this time. Well, we looked at those boundary angles and they were based around 0, 90, 180, 270 and 360, of course being those values there. Well, we know that they're all related to the exact same thing, related to those acute angles. So let's say take the sine of 180, for example. Well, we know that's a boundary angle over here. So we know that the sine of 0, that's related to the sine of 0, isn't it? Well, we know the sine of 0 is 0, so the sine of 180 is also 0. What about the cosine of 180? Well, we know that's related to the cosine of 0. We look at the acute related angle again, because it's over here. We're going to take away 180, subtract it from 180 degrees. And again, well, it's the same as the cos of 0, but of course, because we're over here in on the border of quadrants 2 and 3, that answer is going to be negative. Okay, so of course the cosine of 0 is 1, so the cosine of 180 would be just negative 1. So again, these will all be based around those values that we put on the board today. What if I have something like this? If I had something like, I'm going to look at the tan of 240 degrees. Okay, well, that's in what quadrant's that in? It's somewhere between 180 and 270, so we're in quadrant 3, and we know that tan is greater than 0 there, and so that's some information that will help us. What's our acute angle here? Well, we did theta minus 180, take off that straight line when we're in the third quadrant, so it's my acute angle is 240 minus 180, which is 60. So we know that in some way the tan of 240 is equal to the tan of 60. Well, again, we've got to check the sign, but of course the tan of 60 we know is positive, but the tan of 240 is also positive. And why's that? Because we know that in quadrant 3, all stations 2 are in the 2 quadrants. That's still positive, and well, that means the tan of 240 is just equal to the tan of 60, which is root 3. Again, you can check that in your calculator if you would like. All these are true. What about one more? Just one more to check. What about if I have something like the cosine of negative 30 degrees? Okay, well, where's negative 30 degrees? Let's just go draw ourselves a little diagram. We start at 0 there. The negative 30 degrees is somewhere down here. Okay, so it's that angle there. Okay, well, it's the same as being in quadrant 4. So that means cos theta is positive. And we just go 360 minus theta. Well, I hope what you'll see is that my related angle is somewhere up here. So it's actually my acute angle of 30 degrees. So the cos of negative 30 will be the same as the cos of 30. And again, well, we've got to check whether it's positive or negative. But of course, because it's quadrant 4, we're in the all stations 2 central quadrant. Well, cos is positive, so that means it's just positive. Now, what was the cos of 30? Well, the cos of 30, I believe, was just root 3 on 2. And because we're in the 4th quadrant, it stays positive. So our answer there is positive. All right, boys, I'll put this on iLearn, as I'm sure you've already found, and I'll email you the homework I'd like you to do. Thank you, boys. Hope this helps.